Thank you to Dr. Akmal Aini for giving us opportunity to present on our topic. So today we will presenting on the research project which is titled The Effect of Consumer Price Index, Final Consumption Expenditure and Import of Goods and Services to Gross Domestic Product in Bangladesh. To let you know, this presentation will consist of 5 chapters. So I am Nurdiana Aliana Binti Mohamad Zani. We'll start with the chapter 1, which is an introduction for the topic that we choose. So under this chapter, I will explaining on the problem statement and the significance or importance of this study. So first, let us go with the problem statement. So as we know, world's microeconomic and development conditions change over time and are constantly altering in nature. The link between macroeconomic variables is not a one-time solution but a continuous process. Because the relationship is inconclusive, it must be investigated again and again. So, this research is to investigate and study the impact of economic factors on the economic growth of developing country, which we choose Bangladesh. It will be a research between consumer price index, final consumption expenditure, import of goods and services as independent variables, while gross domestic product as dependent variables. This research will provide a relationship of the dependent variables with the independent variables, either it has positive or negative relationship. Next, move on to the significance of study. So how important of this study are? Actually, there is a statement from a news that said Bangladesh will overtake Pakistan in terms of per capita GDP in 2020. So, the research that we made will reveal either the statement is true or not, and to identify either the 3 independent variables relate with the economy. Also, by our research, this will give a knowledge and guidance on the Bangladesh country regarding their economic growth. This study will help the Bangladesh country to make a prediction on the future of their economic growth based on the data that we found. For example, during the 2006, Bangladesh country can know the reason on why they managed to outgrow than Pakistan by seeing the 3 variables that we will use to identify the relationship with their economic growth.
Hi, I am Mohamad Farizuan bin Ghani. I will explain chapter 2 in this studies, which is literature review. Before we go further for the literature review, let's see the research story first. Research story that relate to our studies is macroeconomic theory. Macroeconomy is a subfield of economics that examines problems that affects an economy as a whole rather than just individual or marketplace. Understanding a collective phenomena like economic growth, business cycle, unemployment, inflation, and international economy, among others, is the focus of macroeconomy. So, this story of macroeconomics show that it relate to our studies and variables it study the phenomena of the entire economy. For a literature review, it is a document that summarizes, demonstrates knowledge and grasp of the scholarly literature on a particular topic in a reference. These are our variable in the study. For the first variable is a gross domestic product as our dependent variable, and the other 3 variables are independent variable, which are consumer price index, final consumption expenditure, and import. Gross domestic product is a typical measure of economic added generated by a country output of goods and services over a certain specific time. Thus, applying GDP per capita at purchasing power parity is able to compare standard of living between nations. Based on research by Zani and Resi in 2019 found that import have a positive relationship with GDP. However, the finding of Gokal and Hanif in 2004 used a variety of economic concepts to investigate the relationship between Fiji inflation and economic development. They show the weak inverse relation between consumer price index and GDP. For the consumer price index, measure price changes in goods and services purchased by urban consumers out of pockets, where the GDP's price index and implicit price deflator measure price changes in goods and services purchased by consumers, businesses, government and foreigners but not importers. According Mohd in 2015 claims that GDP and CPI have a positive significant relationships. The purpose of these studies was to look into the relationship between CPI and GDP in Mauritania by using the time series. However, in Tanzania, since in 1999 investigate the relationship between economic growth and inflation. The research covered in year 1990 to 2013 by using the time series. The result found that they have no mutual integration between them. Then for final consumption expenditure, in their most recent analysis, Hatival and Yadev in 2007 revealed that there is a better rational causal relationship between national income, FCE and economic services in India. Defense services were discovered to be autonomous and there is a one-way link between interest payment and income. In the meantime, FCE also show a negative impact on GDP for both developed and less developed nations, according to research by Bars in 1990 and Landau in 1983 and 1986. Lastly, for import. Import is a service or goods purchased in one nation but made in another. Based on the past research, Helauddin and Ms. Jamiat Janat Khanam in 2017 claims that import is negatively related with GDP. The purpose of this study to using 32 years of time series data to see the relationship between import and GDP in Bangladesh. After that, empirically, the relationship between imports and economic growth in Turkey was studied. The study showed that the GDP and consumption goods import and other commodity import have a unidirectional connection, according Ahmad Ugur in 2008.
Hi, I'm Abid Uwais bin Hasim. I would like to explain chapter 3 in this study, which is research methodology. Research design. There are 6 elements of research design, which are the purpose of the study, types of investigation, researcher interference, study setting, unit of analysis, and time horizon. The study is hypothesis testing study that is designed to identify the nature of specific relationship. The purpose of the study is to find out whether are there any positive correlations, negative correlation, or no correlations between the variables. The type of investigation in this study is correlational investigation. A correlational research design indicates the movement of at least 2 concepts or variables at the same time. The type of researcher interference is minimal interference. This study is based on the observation of previous data. There is minimal and no researcher interference in the study. This study is conducted in non-contrast settings, where it occurs naturally and in non-human made surroundings. The unit of analysis used in this study is country, because we collected data from Bangladesh only. This study used longitudinal studies as a time horizon. We take many observations over a longer period of time to meet the objective of this study. The data for this study was collected from 1990 to 2020. For this study, a total of 31 observations were used for each variable. The population in this research focuses on the consumer price index, final consumption expenditure, and import. All the data used in this study are from secondary data. The data was collected from different sources such as DataStream and World Bank Open Data. Okay, this is the study research framework. This figure shows the relationship between GDP and independent variables that affect GDP, which is CPI, FCE, and imports. Okay, this is the study hypothesis development. First null hypothesis is there is no significant relationship between consumer price index and gross domestic product. Second null hypothesis is there is no significant relationship between final consumption expenditure and gross domestic product. The third null hypothesis is there is no significant relationship between import and gross domestic product. There are 6 test considerations for data analysis in this study, which are multiple linear regression, descriptive analysis, correlation analysis, normality test, heteroscedasticity test, and multicollinearity test.
Hi, I'm Nurdiana Qamarina and I will continue on chapter 4, which I will talk about regression analysis. Regression analysis is used to determine whether to accept a hypothesis, a dependent variable's relationship with one or more independent variables are estimated. Based on the result, p-value of the F statistic is 0.000641, which is less than 5%. This means the linear model is overall valid and the null hypothesis must be rejected. The first component of variable is consumer price index. The table shows that result that CPI coefficient is 0.003474. It assumes that for each 1% increase in the consumer price index, a 0.003474% increase in gross domestic product. Assume that the other variable will remain constant. The probability value for CPS is 0.6020, which is more than the 5% significant level. Next, the second component is final consumption expenditure. The final consumption expenditure coefficient value is negative 0.074229 or negative 7.4229% according to the data. It shows that assuming all other things stay constant, there will be a 7.4229% decrease in GDP for every 1% rise in final consumption expenditure. The probability value is thus 0.3963, which has a significant level greater than 5%. This suggests that the p-value is insignificant, implying that the influence of FCE on GDP will be insignificant. The last component of the variable is import. The table showed that results that the import coefficient is 0.107118. It explained that if the import increased by 1%, the gross domestic product will increase by 0.107118%, withholding other independent variable constants. Moreover, the probability value for import is 0.0483. This shows that import is significant and has a positive relationship with gross domestic product, which means import will lead to significant impact on gross domestic product.
My name is Faeiza Binti Mohd Zalifoddin. I will continue with Chapter 5, Conclusion and Recommendation. Before that, I will explain our independent variables are significant or not with dependent variables. For the first research objective, the findings showed insignificant relationship between CPI and GDP. The result is in line with the study of Katiwada in 2020. Katiwada used descriptive statistics and econometric models to identify the relationship between CPI and GDP. The results show that there was no significant relationship between GDP growth and CPI. The outcome is also consistent with the study of Oluwatoyin. Oluwatoyin found the CPI has no significant impact on economic growth. For the second research objective, the findings show insignificant relationship between FCE and GDP. This finding is in accordance with empirical findings from numerous journal articles, such as those by Ansari in 1997, who attempted to establish the direction of causality between FCE and GDP from Ghana, Kenya, and South Africa. Using the Holmes-Hulton 1990 causality test, a modified version of Granger test and standard Granger testing procedure. In the meantime, there is also evidence of other studies from researcher Abizadeh and Yusefi 1998 using Granger type causality test to identify the relationship between FCE and GDP. Lastly, for the third research objective, the findings show significant relationship between import and GDP. The outcome is consistent with the study of Hassan, Hossein, and Sayem in 2021. The study used multiple regression analysis model to determine the relationship between import and GDP. The study showed that import have a positive relationship with GDP. The result is also in line with the study of Mohamad Noor, Samsul Ikram and Ramli Norima in 2019. The study claimed that import have an important and vital role to play in driving economic growth. Now, I will pass to the next presenter.
All in all, we can conclude that the majority of research on the factors impacting GDP that included imports as independent variables revealed that these components significantly affect GDP, while consumer price index and final consumption expenditure are insignificant with GDP. So one of our suggestions to the future researcher is they can actually increase the sample size of the study and also change the time series data that we use to panel data. By that, maybe the future researchers can find more accurate findings from the research, and the independent variables that we find not significant with the GDP can change to significant with the GDP. So that's all from our group. Thank you.